My dad warned he'd stop paying my tuition if I refused to bow at my golden sister's wedding. They still saw me as their failure. They had no idea I'd graduated top of my class, earned six figures, and returned to ruin their perfect day. Imagine getting a phone call that basically tells you, show up at your sister's wedding, or consider yourself cut off forever. They thought I'd panic, that I'd crawl back like I always did. What they didn't know, I wasn't coming back to obey. I was coming back to burn down their perfect little fantasy. See, my phone had already lit up with my father's name 5 times that morning. 5 times. And I knew exactly what he wanted. There was no, how are you? No, I'm proud of you. Just a cold, hard demand. You will attend your sister's wedding or forget about college. We're done paying. He thought that would break me. He thought I'd come crawling back, just like I always used to. But what he didn't know was that I had already graduated from one of the top universities in the country with honors on a full scholarship. While they were busy imagining me wasting away at some community college, I was secretly building a life they never, ever imagined I could have without them. I had a 6-figure job, my own high-rise apartment, and absolutely zero debt. They had no control over me anymore. So, I booked a first-class flight home. Not to beg, not to obey, but to expose the brutal truth they refused to see. They wanted me at that wedding? Fine. But I wasn't coming as the forgotten daughter. I was coming as the storm. And believe me, what happened next absolutely destroyed their picture-perfect day. It shattered my golden sister's fantasy, and it forced my entire family to face a reality they'd tried so hard to ignore for years. This isn't just some story about revenge. This is about power, about truth, and about finally taking back what was stolen from you. By the time that wedding was over, no one, and I mean no one, looked at me the same again. Let me tell you exactly how it all unfolded. My name is Elena Walker. I was 26 years old, living in a high-rise overlooking Lake Michigan. By day, I was a data analyst for one of Chicago's top tech firms. By night, I was studying code, saving every penny, and enjoying the quiet reward of a life I had built entirely on my own terms. Nobody in my family knew how far I'd come. Not because I was ashamed, definitely not, but because they never even bothered to ask. And after years of being overlooked, forgotten, and just flat-out dismissed, I'd stopped offering information they clearly didn't want. I was sipping coffee at my glass desk when my father's name popped up again, the 5th time. I didn't move. I didn't even flinch. The screen buzzed once, twice, then finally went still. It was immediately followed by an email. Subject line, your sister needs you. Last chance. I didn't need to read the body to know what it said. I'd grown up decoding my father's tone long before I learned to read words on a page. But I read it anyway. Lily's wedding is the most important event of her life. Be there or forget about any future support. No greeting. No asking how I was. Not even a hint of acknowledgement that the last time we'd spoken, I was 19, standing at a bus terminal with 2 suitcases and a backpack. Just that same tone that had echoed through my entire childhood, cold, commanding, absolutely final. Then came the voicemail. My father's voice filled the room like a storm cloud. This has gone on long enough, Elena. Your sister's wedding is in 2 weeks. The festivities start this weekend. If you can't put aside whatever bitterness you're holding, don't expect another dime from this family. Your mother is beside herself with worry. Call me. Bitterness. That's what they called it. Not distance. Not survival. Not self-preservation. Just bitterness. The truth was actually much simpler. I had left their home 7 years ago and hadn't looked back. I hadn't run away in anger, though trust me, there was anger. I left with a quiet, fierce resolve. Even at 17, I knew that if I stayed, I would slowly disappear. One overlooked test score at a time. One ignored trophy. One forgotten birthday. To them, I had always been the other daughter. The one who followed the rules, cleaned up after herself, and got straight A's without being asked. While Lily, beautiful, dramatic, adored Lily, she had basked in every single spotlight, even the ones she didn't earn. The last time I'd even bothered to come home, Lily was being praised for getting a role as tree number 2 in a middle school play. I had just won the state science fair. My parents forgot to show up. It wasn't personal, I used to tell myself. It was just the way things were. So, I stopped expecting anything. I found scholarships, worked nights tutoring math, and yes, I even forged an acceptance letter to a local community college while secretly accepting admission to Columbia University. I mapped out my independence like it was a military operation. And now, years later, I had everything I needed. An apartment, a career, savings, and peace. And then this. The message. The voicemail. The veiled threat. Be there or forget about any future support. They still thought I needed them. Still believed they held all the power. Still imagined I was that scared girl they had cornered into staying close to home for Lily's sake, as if my sister's self-worth was more important than my own education. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know I'd graduated with honors. They didn't know I made more money than both of them combined. They didn't know I hadn't needed their money for years. And I wasn't about to tell them over the phone. I opened my laptop and clicked through to the airline website. The wedding was in 2 weeks. Plenty of time. I scrolled through ticket options and selected first class. Not because I needed the luxury, but because it sent a message. They wanted me home. I would come. But not as the quiet daughter. Not as the forgotten one. I was coming as the woman they didn't see coming. My finger hovered over the confirmation button. I clicked. And I smiled. Let the wedding begin. The small town hadn't changed a bit. The roads were still cracked in the same places they'd been a decade ago. The welcome sign was still slightly leaning to the left. But as I stepped out of my rental car and stood at the base of my parents' front porch, I knew I had changed. I rang the bell, but the door swung open before it even chimed. My mother stood there holding a clipboard, her eyes scanning my face like I was a stranger. "Elena," she said flatly. "You made it." No hug. No smile. Just a quick glance behind her, as if checking whether the neighbors had seen me arrive. Inside, the house smelled of vanilla candles and something chemical, fresh paint maybe. The living room was unrecognizable, buried under piles of tulle, ribbon, and white cardboard boxes labeled bridesmaid kits and programs to fold. "You can put your bag over there," my mother said, gesturing vaguely toward a corner. "We need help getting the welcome baskets done before 4. I hadn't even taken off my coat. "I just walked in the door," I replied. My mother looked up then, just for a second. "Well, now you're here. Be useful." It felt exactly like stepping back into a role I thought I'd outgrown. I'd come prepared for cold shoulders, but not for complete invisibility. Within 5 minutes, I was handed a hot glue gun and a stack of faux pearl trimmings, as if the last 7 years of my life had never even happened. My father appeared an hour later, reading glasses perched low, holding a seating chart in one hand and a paper plate in the other. "Good. You're settled," he said. "Lily wants to review the table arrangements after dinner. And we need someone to steam the reception linens." "No. How was your trip?" "No, it's good to see you." "Just orders." I said nothing. I noted how easily they slipped back into treating me like a utility. I could have told them I'd booked a first-class ticket or that I'd left an urgent team meeting with my company's CFO to be there. But what would be the point? I made my way upstairs to the guest room. No longer mine. It had long since been converted into extra storage and changed into something plain, careful not to wrinkle my travel clothes. When I came back down, Lily had arrived. You could hear her before you saw her. I specifically said cascading, not gathered. Lily's voice floated down the staircase, sharp and breathless. "If the florist can't follow simple instructions, maybe we should find another florist." I watched as my sister descended in a flurry of chiffon and faux tan, phone still pressed to her ear. Lily spotted me, raised a single finger, the universal sign for wait, and continued berating someone on the other end of the call. When she finally hung up, she offered me an air kiss near the cheek. "You made it," she said, as if surprised. "Thank God. The caterer's threatening to walk and Mom can't figure out the seating chart. This wedding is going to kill me." She didn't ask how I'd been. Didn't notice the tension in my shoulders or the fatigue in my eyes. In this house, Lily's stress eclipsed all else. "Elena," their mother chimed in, appearing behind them. "You'll meet Evan at dinner. He's been such a help. Brilliant with investments." Elena's good with numbers, too, aren't you? Lily added casually, already walking away. Well, you'll see. He's amazing. Dinner was at 6. Evan arrived precisely on time, bearing an expensive bottle of red and wearing a pressed white shirt that looked made to measure. He was tall, with a polished smile and the kind of handshake meant to impress. So this is the mysterious sister, he said, locking eyes with me. I offered my hand. Elena. Welcome, he added smoothly with a slight bow of the head. Lily talks about you all the time. She says you're the quiet one. I smiled politely, but said nothing. I had met enough men like Evan to know when a performance was underway. Still, I listened. Evan spoke well, almost too well. He talked about crypto with a level of confidence that bordered on theatrical, threw around phrases like market velocity and token liquidity with ease. Claimed to be part of a global network of investors with direct pipelines to platforms in Singapore and Zurich. Every few minutes he glanced toward my father, Charles, who hung on his every word. He's already helping your dad look at some real estate restructuring. My mother, Margaret, chimed in over the salad course. Just brilliant. I asked a question, something technical about blockchain protocols. Evan answered, but it was a bit too vague, a little too rehearsed. I leaned back in my chair and watched him talk. Charming, confident, slick. Too slick. Lily beamed the entire time. She laughed when Evan made a joke about people still using banks, leaned into his shoulder like a teenage girl with a crush, and recounted how he'd helped Daddy understand crypto in a single afternoon. The room pulsed with shared admiration. I, once again, was the quiet observer, the invisible thread in the fabric of my own family. But this time, something had shifted. I was no longer a girl desperate to be noticed. I was a woman watching a puzzle I didn't yet fully understand, but I could already see the edges starting to come apart. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, a space rarely used except for holidays, or, in this case, occasions that demanded appearances. Margaret had arranged the table with polished silverware, linen napkins folded like swans, and wine glasses that caught the chandelier's light just so. It was clear this meal wasn't just about food. It was a stage. Evan took his seat at the head of the table across from Charles, with Lily nestled proudly beside him. I was seated at the far end, opposite my mother. The seating arrangement wasn't accidental. It never was in this house. The opening courses were quiet, save for Lily's usual commentary about table runners and how the photographer was in love with her vision. But by the time the main course arrived, Evan had found his rhythm. It didn't take much prompting. So, Charles and I have been going over a few investment strategies, he began, cutting into his fillet with a practiced hand. With rates the way they are, and volatility in the public markets, there's incredible upside in decentralized assets if you know where to look. Charles nodded solemnly, as if he'd been studying finance his entire life. He's really opened my eyes. I never realized how old-fashioned traditional banks are. Evan smiled, pleased. Most people don't. But in Singapore, Zurich, even Dubai, we're seeing accelerated models that make the US look prehistoric. The institutions overseas are already shifting their portfolios. I'm working closely with a group that's offering pre-IPO tokens for a blockchain firm with government partnerships in Asia. Very exclusive. Lily, sipping her wine, leaned forward. Tell them about the yacht. Evan chuckled. Well, last month I met with one of our angel investors on his yacht. In the Adriatic. Only way to talk business without distractions. The table gave a polite laugh. I did not. Instead, I picked up my fork, calmly placed it down again, and asked, which platform are the tokens being issued on? Ethereum? Solana? Or something proprietary? Evan blinked. It's a proprietary setup. We've built it on a hybrid framework that optimizes both transaction speed and security. Interesting, I said. Even hybrid chains can be tricky. What protocol are you using to handle smart contract deployment? There was a pause. Subtle, but it was there. Evan smiled again, but it took a moment longer to reach his eyes. It's a layered approach, he said, waving vaguely. We focus more on strategic outcomes than the technical nitty-gritty. The tech people handle that. Margaret jumped in quickly, sensing a shift. What matters is that Evan gets results. He's already helped Charles rethink our entire portfolio. That's true, Charles added. He's got access to opportunities you won't find on the open market. I tilted my head slightly. Do those opportunities come with regulatory oversight? I assume you have SEC documentation for any domestic capital raised. Evan's jaw twitched, almost imperceptibly. These are private placements, Elena. Not your average 401k stuff. Charles leaned back, setting his fork down harder than necessary. Is there a point to this line of questioning? I looked at my father. No. Point, just curious. Seems to me like you're being combative, Charles said. Not everyone needs to be interrogated at the dinner table. I wasn't aware asking about financial compliance was combative, I replied. You've always had a way of making people uncomfortable, Margaret said with a strained smile. Just let your sister be happy. Evan laughed, light and dismissive. It's fine. I get this a lot. Some people just don't understand what we're building. It's new. Revolutionary ideas always attract skeptics. Lily, visibly irritated, reached for her wine. Why are you doing this? I looked at my sister. Doing what? Making it a thing. Lily said. Every time something good happens to me, you find a way to throw shade. Charles pointed his knife toward me like it were a baton. That's exactly it. You've always been resentful. It's not Evan's fault you've been struggling. I didn't laugh. I didn't flinch. I simply picked up my glass, took a small sip, and let the silence settle. They didn't know. They still thought I was working part-time, cobbling together tuition, maybe living with roommates in some drafty apartment. They still believed I was the one who fell short. I had made 6 figures last quarter alone. But saying it out loud would only turn into another accusation, bragging, ungrateful, difficult. So instead, I sat with my thoughts. Evan returned to his speech, talking about token liquidity and off-market deals that sounded suspiciously vague. He mentioned more cities, Singapore again, a firm in Switzerland, a partner in the Caymans, all impressive, if only by virtue of sounding far away. But the pattern was forming. Big words, global locations, no specifics, no documentation. It wasn't the content that bothered me. It was the choreography. Evan knew how to impress people like my father. Confident tone, bold claims, exotic names. To someone like Charles, that was all it took to feel important, in control, ahead of the curve. I looked around the table. They were mesmerized. Lily's eyes sparkled. My mother smiled with pride. My father nodded like he'd just discovered a gold mine. Evan was winning the room, and he knew it. And yet, in all his polish and precision, something about him didn't add up. Not yet. Not clearly. But I felt it. Like the tension before a wire snaps, the quiet note behind the music that doesn't belong. I didn't know what Evan was hiding, but I intended to find out. The next morning, I wandered into my father's study, looking for a pen. I had barely slept, my mind too busy replaying the previous night's dinner. Evan's performance, as slick as it was, hadn't satisfied my curiosity. If anything, it had sharpened it. Charles's study was, as I remembered, lined with shelves of unread books and framed certificates of financial courses he had taken at community college decades ago. On the desk sat an open file folder, neatly stacked papers waiting to be signed. I recognized the header immediately. Home Equity Loan Refinance Agreement. My breath caught. I flipped through the pages carefully, my trained eyes scanning the loan terms. It was recent, dated just 3 weeks prior. The house, the very same one nearly paid off after 25 years, was now tied to a second mortgage, a significant one. I flipped further. There, scribbled in Charles's tidy cursive, was a note in the margin. Per Evan's recommendation, 20% returns projected by Q2. I froze. This wasn't just my father dabbling in an investment. He had staked the house on it. The house my mother once swore would be their legacy. All on Evan's word. I replaced the papers exactly where I found them and exited quietly. Downstairs, the wedding madness had resumed. Flower arrangements, catering calls, place card chaos. It was the perfect distraction. Later that afternoon, as I stepped into the backyard for air, I spotted Aunt Diane beside the rose bushes, pulling weeds with gloved hands. I walked over, partly to escape, partly for clarity. Diane looked up and smiled. Didn't think we'd see you again, kid. I forced a smile. Family duty. Diane stood, brushing dirt from her knees. Lily's wedding is quite a production. You could say that, I replied. Diane glanced toward the house, then leaned closer. You believe in that fiancé of hers? I raised an eyebrow. You don't. I don't know, Diane admitted. He's charming, sure, but something feels off. Last month, a neighbor down in Tampa lost his retirement fund to a guy who talked just like Evan. Crypto this, global that, promised returns that sounded too good to be real. My pulse quickened. Do you remember the name? I asked. Just bits, Diane said. The guy changed his name a couple of times. But one of the aliases was Edward something or Ethan. It wasn't much, but it was enough. That night, back in the guest room, I powered up my laptop. I no longer needed to pretend. Gone was the obedient daughter. What sat before the screen now was a trained analyst with an advanced degree in data science, a career in fraud detection, and a brain built for pattern recognition. I opened my usual suite of tools: public registries, business databases, social media scrapers, and metadata trackers. It was second nature to me now. The same way an artist sees brush strokes, I saw digital inconsistencies. I started with the name Evan Cross. Nothing, at least nothing predating 2 years ago. I widened the search. Then I found something curious, an archived engagement announcement from 3 years ago in Colorado. Same face, different name. Ethan Lewis. I dug deeper. A LinkedIn profile registered under Edward Lambert. Now deleted, but with remnants cached by the Internet Archive. The profile matched Evan's resume too perfectly: blockchain advisor, investor network, global finance. 3 aliases, same face, same playbook. And with each identity, I noticed the same pattern: appearance, charm, investment pitch, then vanishing after a large financial shift. I pulled the public bankruptcy records for each location tied to the previous names. Each showed an uptick in personal losses from community investors within months of Evans, or Ethan's or Edward's, appearance. It was no longer a hunch. It was a pattern, a deliberate, polished operation. And now he had my family in his crosshairs. I sat back, heart pounding, but my face calm. I wasn't angry. Not yet. This wasn't personal vengeance. It was statistical inevitability. I had seen this before in other cases, just never in my own home. I opened a new file, labeled it Cross-Fraud Risk Report V1. Tomorrow, I would begin building the case. And this time, my family would be forced to listen, whether they wanted to or not. I didn't sleep much that night. My laptop screen had burned its glow into my vision long after I shut it down. I kept thinking of the faces behind the data. Real people, real losses. And now my sister was standing at the edge of the same trap. The next morning, I made a call. It took 3 transfers and a sympathetic dispatcher in Colorado to help me track down one of the names I had found in my late-night search: Karen Delaney, a woman listed in a police report from 3 years ago, tied to a financial disappearance eerily similar to what I now suspected. Karen's voice was cautious on the phone. Who are you again? My name is Elena Hart, I said. You don't know me, but I think the man who nearly ruined your life is about to do the same to my sister. There was a long pause. Then where can we meet? We sat across from each other at a small table in a quiet cafe just outside of town. Karen looked older than her years, eyes guarded, posture stiff. Her hands trembled slightly as she stirred her coffee. I didn't speak first. I let Karen take the time she needed. After several minutes, Karen finally opened her purse and slid over a worn folder. Inside were photographs, bank statements, email printouts, even a faded engagement invitation with the name Edward Lawson printed in gold lettering. I blinked. The face on the photo smiled back at me. Sleek suit, carefully styled hair, arm wrapped around Karen's waist. It was unmistakably Evan. Different name, different city, same man. We met at a tech conference in Denver, Karen began, her voice low but steady. He said he was building a new crypto platform, something revolutionary. I didn't understand all of it, but he made it sound real. He made me feel like I was part of something big. She looked away for a moment, as if ashamed of the memory. He proposed 6 months later. My family was thrilled. He was charming, helpful, everyone loved him. He convinced my parents to co-sign a loan for our new place. I wired him $60,000 for a pre-investment opportunity he said had to be made fast. 3 days before the wedding, he vanished. Karen lifted her sleeve slightly, revealing a delicate tattoo near her wrist. A date. I got this to remind myself never to ignore red flags again. My hands tightened around my coffee cup. Did the police find him? They tried, Karen said bitterly. But the money was routed through offshore accounts. No contract, no direct trail. It was ruled a civil matter. Just like that, he was gone, and I was left with debt, shame, and a mother who still asks what I did wrong. I thought I was alone, Karen added quietly. Until you called. You're not, I replied. He's using a new name now. Evan Cross. He's engaged to my sister, Lily. The wedding is in 5 days. Karen inhaled sharply. 5 days. That's when he disappears. I nodded. He's already convinced my father to refinance the house. My mother's retirement fund is in. I need proof. Real proof. Karen reached into the folder again and pulled out a USB stick. I saved everything. Even after the police said it wasn't enough. Emails, voicemails, texts. And there are 2 more women I've spoken to over the years. Same pattern, different names. I took the drive, my jaw set. Thank you. This changes everything. Karen leaned forward, her voice more forceful now. Your sister won't believe it until it's too late. I didn't. Not when my best friend tried to warn me. Love makes you blind. I don't need her to believe me yet, I said. I just need to be ready when everything starts to crack. As I stood to leave, Karen grabbed my wrist. You seem like the kind who keeps her promises, she said. So, promise me something. I looked her in the eye. Don't let him ruin another life. I won't, I whispered. He picked the wrong sister this time. As I stepped out into the cool morning air, the weight of Karen's pain settled over my shoulders. But so did a growing fire. This wasn't just about saving Lily anymore. It was about justice for every woman who had been deceived, every parent who had been tricked, every future that had been stolen. And this time, I had the skills, the tools, and now the proof. Evan's perfect game was about to be exposed, and Elena Hart would be the one to do it. The living room felt colder than usual, despite the late afternoon sun casting a golden hue across the hardwood floors. I stood by the coffee table, my laptop opened, a stack of printed documents beside me. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, but my voice remained steady. I need all of you to listen carefully, I said. Charles, my father, sat stiffly on the leather armchair, arms crossed. Margaret hovered near the fireplace, pretending to tidy a flower arrangement that didn't need fixing. Lily was curled up on the sofa, a silk robe draped around her, her eyes rimmed with excitement and exhaustion from wedding planning. Evan, the charming fiancé, leaned casually against the wall, swirling a glass of wine, his confidence undisturbed. I connected the laptop to the television and brought up a slideshow. The first photo appeared, Evan's face, smiling, clean-cut, but under the name Edward Lawson. The room shifted. Then the next, Ethan Lewis, same face, different background, next to another woman in an engagement photo. A bank statement followed, showing tens of thousands transferred before a wedding that never happened. Police reports, names of victims, timelines. Each file I displayed built the pattern tighter, more damning. Karen's voice, recorded from our meeting, played through the speakers. He left 3 days before the wedding. Took everything. I turned to face them. His name isn't Evan. He's used at least 3 aliases. He's done this before. Every single time he wins. Takes the money. And disappears. Evan chuckled softly, the sound like nails against a chalkboard. Are you serious? This is a smear campaign. You think I'm some con artist using fake names? That's absurd. He turned to Charles and Margaret, his voice warm, wounded. Sir, ma'am, I love Lily. I'd never do anything to hurt her. This is disgusting. Lily looked stunned. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Her gaze darted between the screen and Evan's face, searching for reassurance. Charles stood up, his voice sharp. That's enough, Elena. You've embarrassed yourself and insulted a guest in our home. He's not a guest, I said. He's a predator. Margaret stepped forward, her tone clipped. You've always had issues with your sister's happiness. This isn't about Evan. It's about you. What? I whispered. You've been distant for years, never supportive, and now you come back uninvited and try to ruin her wedding. Her one perfect day. Margaret's voice rose, trembling. Lily finally spoke, tears brimming. You were never happy for me, Elena. Never. Every time I achieved something, you made it about you. Why can't you just let me have this? I took a step forward. Because he's lying to you. Lily shook her head violently. No, you're lying. Because you can't stand that for once, someone picked me. Not you. I reeled. The words hit harder than I expected. I looked to my father, hoping for something, doubt, consideration, anything. But instead, Charles glared at me with the cold authority of a man convinced. You're just jealous, Elena. Admit it. You've always been jealous that Lily has what you never could, charm, warmth, a family who actually wants her around. The silence that followed was deafening. I make 6 figures, I whispered. I've built a life on my own, and none of you ever noticed. That's not the point. Margaret snapped. Family is about showing up, supporting one another, not digging up dirt and waving it around like some kind of victory. I stared at them. My mouth opened, but words failed me. I wasn't sure what hurt more, their refusal to see the truth or their eagerness to believe the worst of me. Evan, ever the actor, put an arm around Lily's shoulder. It's okay, babe. Let her have her moment. She clearly needs help. Margaret flinched at that word, but said nothing. Lily leaned into him. I shut the laptop slowly. I warned you. As I turned to leave, Aunt Diane, who had been silently watching from the doorway, stepped further into the room. Her eyes didn't leave Charles's face. Elena, Diane said quietly, can I speak to you for a moment? We stepped into the hallway. Diane's voice dropped to a whisper. I believe you. My eyes filled with tears, but I didn't let them fall. Diane continued, Charles, he's not telling the whole truth. The refinancing papers you found? He didn't mention them to Margaret. And when I asked him about them yesterday, he got flustered. He's hiding something. My spine straightened. What kind of something? I don't know. But he's too invested in Evan. And not just emotionally, financially. He's got more at stake than he's saying. I nodded. Then I need to move faster. I walked out the front door, my heart pounding, not with grief this time, but with clarity. My family had chosen comfort over truth again. But this time, the truth had teeth, and I wasn't done yet. The front door slammed shut behind me with a force that echoed down the darkened street. The click of the lock that followed felt louder than anything Charles had ever said. I stood motionless on the porch, stunned, the warm evening air unable to fight off the cold that had settled in my chest. It had happened so fast. Charles's face, red with fury, had twisted as he jabbed a finger toward the door. Get out. I don't care where you go, but you will not stay in this house another minute. Margaret had gasped, but said nothing. Lily buried her face in Evan's chest, shaking with tears, not over what had been revealed, but over the disruption I had caused. Not one of them had asked if the documents were real. Not one had stopped to consider that I might be telling the truth. The choice had already been made. Now I stood with my suitcase beside me, the porch light casting long shadows. I hadn't planned to reveal the truth this way. But I wasn't going to leave like some disgraced child, slinking into the night. I turned around, stepped back to the doorway, and knocked once, hard. Charles flung open the door. What more could you possibly want? To say what should have been said years ago, I replied, my voice calm, but full of steel. Margaret appeared behind him, looking torn, but silent. Lily refused to look at me. You think I came here out of jealousy? I said, my gaze locking with my father's. You think I spent nights digging into Evan's past because I couldn't stand seeing Lily in a white dress? No. I came here because, unlike you, I pay attention to what matters. I opened my purse and pulled out my company ID badge, holding it up so they could see. I didn't go to community college. I went to Columbia, full scholarship, graduated top of my class in data analytics. I reached into my bag again and held up a letter with the company letterhead, my most recent promotion to senior data strategist. I've been working at one of the most respected tech firms in Chicago since I was 21. I pay my own rent, my own health insurance, and yes, my own student loans, because you cut me off when I didn't follow the plan you set for me. Charles's mouth opened, but no sound came. I've been independent since I was 18, I continued, my voice unwavering. Everything I have, I earned. While you were too busy giving Lily applause for just showing up, I was out there building a life you never bothered to ask about. I took a step forward. Charles instinctively stepped back. I didn't come here to destroy anything. I came here to protect what little is left. I tried. I tried to warn you before it was too late. You're still leaving. Charles growled, though with less conviction than before. I know, I said. I looked once more at my mother. Margaret's lips quivered, but she said nothing. Then at Lily, who still clung to Evan like he was her last chance at happiness. Evan's face remained unreadable, but his eyes were calculating, already preparing for the next move. I drew in a breath. I'm not running away, Dad, I said softly but firmly. I'm walking away with the truth. And you'll remember that when everything falls apart. I turned and walked back down the steps, my heels striking the concrete like punctuation marks. Each step was a beat of finality. I didn't look back, not once. The night air felt different this time, sharper, cleaner. I pulled my coat tighter, not against the cold, but against the weight I'd finally shed. The invisible daughter was no longer invisible. Inside that house, they would continue spinning illusions for a little while longer. But truth, I knew, had a way of showing up, loud, brutal, and undeniable. And when it did, they'd remember the moment I stood at that door, told them who I truly was, and left without asking for anything in return. 3 days before the wedding, Evan disappeared. At first, Margaret assumed he had gone to finalize a surprise for the reception. Charles brushed it off, claiming Evan had mentioned a business meeting. Even Lily tried to excuse it, saying he might be giving her space before the big day. But as the hours ticked by, unanswered calls piled up, and Evan's voicemail changed to an automated service, the illusion began to crack. By the next morning, his phone was off. His hotel suite, booked under a different name, was empty. The front desk confirmed he'd checked out before dawn and had left no forwarding address. Then came the banking alerts. Charles stared at the screen in disbelief, every cent from their joint wedding account gone. Margaret opened her retirement portal only to find her balance at zero. The mortgage account, refinanced just a few weeks prior, now showed a massive balance due with no sign of repayment. Lily stood frozen in the kitchen as Charles tore open envelope after envelope. Each one confirmed what I had tried to warn them about. The trust account Charles had opened to grow wealth through Evan's investment connections? Wiped. The credit cards? Maxed. The backup savings fund? Transferred to an untraceable account linked to an LLC in the Cayman Islands. Margaret collapsed onto the couch, a soft moan escaping her lips as the full scale of the betrayal settled in. Charles clenched his fists so tightly his knuckles turned white, his face pale with disbelief, not just at the theft, but at himself. He had welcomed Evan in, praised him, defended him, and now Evan was gone, just as I said he would be. In the hours that followed, reality hit harder. The caterer pulled out after learning the deposit check had bounced. The florist arrived only to remove all arrangements after non-payment. Even the photographer canceled, citing unpaid invoices. Lily's gown, custom-made and already altered, hung limp in the hallway, untouched. And amid it all, Lily sat in silence. Her perfectly manicured fingers trembled around her phone, hovering for hours over my contact. By evening, she finally sent the message, I was wrong. Please come home. I need you. No emojis. No punctuation. Just a raw, desperate plea. I sat by the window in my Chicago apartment, sipping black coffee. The skyline blinked peacefully in the distance. I had seen the news articles first. Then came Aunt Diane's update. Finally, Lily's message, stark and heavy. I reread. The words again, please come home. The irony wasn't lost on me. Home had never been a place where I felt seen. And now, with their world in ashes, they called for me. A part of me wanted to ignore it. Let them sit in the consequences of their choices. Let them understand what it meant to discard someone who only ever tried to protect them. But another part, the part that still remembered Lily clinging to me during thunderstorms as children, or our shared giggles over secret chocolate bars hidden under the bed, couldn't quite walk away. I set the mug down. Not out of pity. Not out of forgiveness. But because power didn't always mean revenge. Sometimes it meant being the one person who didn't turn away, even when they had. I opened my suitcase and began to pack. Not for a wedding. For the reckoning. The Walker house no longer felt like a home when I returned. The front porch, once glowing with bridal decorations, now stood bare. The white ribbons removed, the flowers gone. The wood beneath the banister chipped where staples had been ripped out in haste. Inside, the silence was heavier than the chaos of wedding preparations had ever been. My father paced in the living room with the same clipboard he had once wielded as authority, but now it hung limp in his hand. Margaret sat at the dining table, her face pale, lines of worry etching deeper than I remembered. Lily was upstairs, her sobs muffled through the floorboards. They had called me back because there was no one else left. I placed my briefcase on the coffee table and remained standing. I did not remove my coat. Did not sit. Did not soften my tone. I will help you, I said, but not on your terms. On mine. Charles turned quickly, his eyes bloodshot, desperate, but still laced with pride. We need immediate funds. The bank, no, I cut him off. Not immediate funds. Not cash. Not a bailout you can squander. Every cent will move through a licensed financial advisor. You will not have direct access. If I step in, it's under professional oversight. Nothing informal. Nothing hidden. My father's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth to argue, but Margaret reached over and touched his wrist, silencing him. I continued, my voice firm. This is not a gift. It's not charity. It's a transaction with conditions. And the first condition is this. I pulled a stack of documents from my briefcase, the paper crisp against the still air. You will sign this acknowledgement. In writing. Witnessed. Notarized. Charles frowned and reached for the top page, scanning it quickly. His face darkened. This is nonsense. My voice sharpened. Read it aloud. Charles slammed the paper back onto the table. Margaret picked it up with trembling hands and read softly. We, Charles and Margaret Walker, acknowledge that for years we created and maintained an environment of favoritism and emotional neglect, favoring one child over the other. Her eyes lifted to me, shame heavy in her expression. You want us to sign this? Yes, I said. Because I will not allow you to rewrite history once you've been rescued. If I help you save this house, save what you have left, then you will put in writing what you denied me for 20 years. You will say it. You will admit it. Charles pushed back his chair so hard it scraped the floor. You don't dictate terms in this house. I leaned forward, my gaze unflinching. I do when I'm the one keeping the roof over your head. For a long, brittle silence, no one moved. Then Margaret's voice broke it, quiet, weary, yet carrying more weight than I had ever heard before. Charles, she's right. He spun toward her. Don't you dare, I said. She's right, Margaret repeated, louder this time. Her hands shook as she set the paper down. Do you know why I recognized what we were doing to her? Because it was done to me. She lifted her eyes to me, and for the first time, they brimmed with something that looked like truth. I was the forgotten one, too. My sister was the golden child. My parents poured everything into her. I swore I would never repeat it. And then I did. My breath caught. I had imagined many things my mother might say in this moment, deflection, excuses, even tears. But not this. Not confession. Margaret pressed her hands together, twisting her wedding ring nervously. I told myself Lily needed more, that she was fragile, that you were strong enough to stand on your own. But really, I was replaying the same script I grew up with. Only this time, I was on the other side. Charles stared at her, thunderstruck. His authority, once so absolute, seemed to drain from him. Margaret turned back to me. If signing this is what it takes, I will sign. Because I won't deny you any longer. I looked at my mother, measuring every word. There was sincerity there, but also too many years of silence to erase with one admission. Still, this was something, more than I had ever been given before. I slid the pen across the table. Then sign. Margaret picked it up with trembling fingers. For a moment, she hesitated, staring at the space where her name would go. Then she pressed the ink into the paper, her signature flowing across the page. I turned to my father. Your turn. Charles's hand hovered, his pride warring with the reality of foreclosure notices and empty accounts. Finally, with a grimace that looked more like defeat than agreement, he scrawled his name. I gathered the signed papers and slid them back into my briefcase. Only then did I sit. Good, I said. Now we can begin. But remember, this isn't about trust anymore. That ended when you chose him over me. This is about control, and this time I have it. No one argued. The balance of power in the Walker family had shifted, and for the first time, Elena wasn't invisible. She was undeniable. The evening stretched heavy inside the Walker living room. The signed papers sat in my briefcase like a silent witness. But I knew a signature alone would not cleanse the past. I looked at my parents, at my sister curled small in the corner of the sofa, and realized the time had come to strip away the last layer of denial. You want to know why I don't believe in your idea of family? I said, my voice calm but unwavering. Because for me, family was always a one-way street. I stood, my eyes fixed on Charles and Margaret. Do you remember my 8th birthday? You forgot. Both of you. I sat in the kitchen waiting for cake that never came while you took Lily to her dance recital. You told me later it was an oversight. But when she won nothing more than a participation ribbon, you took her out for ice cream and posted photos as if it were a championship. Margaret's lips parted, but no words came. 9th grade, I continued, the science fair. I won first place for analyzing water quality in the county. I stood there holding a ribbon while Principal Davis asked why my parents hadn't shown up. You were at Lily's soccer game. She scored 1 goal. You told that story for weeks. My mother's hands gripped the edge of her chair, knuckles white. Charles avoided my eyes. Hi. School graduation, I said, my voice tightening. You left the ceremony early. Not because of traffic, not because of work. Because Lily had a date to prom, and you didn't want her to miss the hair appointment. I walked across that stage and looked up to find the seats where you should have been. Empty. The words landed like stones in water, rippling through the silence. No one moved. My voice softened, but the edge of pain remained. Every milestone that mattered to me you erased. Every moment I thought you might notice, you chose her instead. And I let it happen. I told myself I didn't need your approval. But I did. I just stopped admitting it when it hurt too much to hope. I turned to Lily, whose eyes were glassy, rimmed with mascara smudges. And you, I said. You knew Evan wasn't right, didn't you? Lily flinched. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it. But something in my stare held her there, pinned. Finally, she whispered, I saw things. I knew something was off. What things? I pressed. Lily swallowed hard. He was secretive about his phone. He changed his story sometimes about where he'd been. He promised money from investments that never showed up in our accounts. I thought maybe I was imagining it. No, I said. You thought maybe I was right. And that was unbearable, because if I was right, then you weren't the chosen one anymore. So, you ignored the truth. Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. I wanted one thing, just one thing, where I finally had more than you. And if it meant pretending, if it meant looking away, I did. The confession hung in the air like smoke. No one reached to comfort her. No one spoke. Charles leaned back, his face pale, his authority drained. Margaret pressed her hands to her face, her shoulders shaking. The weight of my words. Lily's admission. The collapse of everything they had built on favoritism and illusion. It all pressed down on the room until even the walls seemed to groan with it. I stood tall in the center of it, no longer invisible, no longer silenced. I had laid bare the truth, and for once there was no quick rebuttal, no dismissive laugh, no easy defense. The house was quiet except for Lily's sobs and the steady tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. For the first time in years, there was no argument left. No excuse to cling to. Just silence. Heavy. Final. The last wall had fallen, and nothing stood between them and the truth anymore. The days after Lily's confession were strangely quiet. The house no longer hummed with denial, but with the hollow echo of people forced to sit with what they had ignored for too long. I thought perhaps that was the end of it. Evan had vanished. His pattern exposed, his grip broken. But predators rarely leave quietly. A week later, I received a letter delivered by courier, heavy cream paper, bold serif font, legal letterhead. It was addressed not to my family, but directly to me. The message was short, precise, and dripping with arrogance. Cease and desist. It accused me of defamation, libel, and intentional interference with contractual relations. It claimed I had fabricated identities to destroy Evan's reputation and demanded I retract my statements or face a lawsuit for damages exceeding $500,000. I read the letter once, then again, my pulse steady. I almost laughed. It was classic Evan: twist the truth, weaponize intimidation, and count on people folding under pressure. But Elena Hart was not one of his usual marks. I picked up the phone and dialed Vivian Scott, my mentor, the woman who had once guided me through my first corporate fraud investigation and who knew the law as well as she knew herself. Vivian answered on the second ring. "He's back, isn't he?" she asked without preamble. "Yes," I said. "And he wants to sue me." Vivian's voice was calm, steady as stone. "Then we'll answer him with the truth he's so afraid of." That evening, we spread the evidence across Vivian's conference table. Not just the screenshots I had collected, but the testimonies Karen had given, the police reports from Colorado, the archived records of Evan's aliases, and bank statements that traced his disappearing acts from state to state. Vivian reviewed each document, annotating margins with legal codes and case precedents. "This isn't defamation," she said firmly. "This is exposure. What he doesn't realize is that by filing this threat, he's handed us an opening." I leaned forward. "You mean federal?" Vivian nodded. "Interstate fraud, multiple victims, financial institutions involved. This isn't just civil anymore. It's criminal. And the feds don't like men who move stolen money across borders." Within a week, the tone shifted. Evan had intended to scare me into silence, but instead, he found himself facing inquiries. Letters went out to the women he had scammed before, requesting statements. The files Vivian assembled were forwarded to contacts in federal enforcement. The story was no longer about one family's heartbreak. It was about a pattern of theft stretching across 3 states and countless bank accounts. Evan tried to fight back, of course. He sent another letter full of legal jargon and bravado. He called Lily late at night, his voice dripping with false tenderness, insisting I was lying, that they were meant to be, that he could still fix everything. But Lily, broken from the wreckage of her own denial, hung up on him. The breaking point came 2 weeks later when federal agents visited the Walker home to ask questions. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Evan's charm had collapsed into a liability, his name now whispered with suspicion rather than awe. He didn't show up to file the lawsuit he had threatened. He didn't appear in court at all. By the time investigators traced the accounts linked to his aliases, Evan Cross, Edward Lawson, Ethan Lewis had already vanished again, fleeing ahead of the net closing in. But this time, it was different. He wasn't disappearing with their money. He was disappearing because he had no other choice. For once, he was the one running. I stood outside the courthouse steps with Vivian at my side, the spring air cool against my skin. I wasn't triumphant, not in the shallow sense. There was no joy in watching my sister's heartbreak or my parents' pride dissolve. But there was justice, real, tangible justice that went beyond family dynamics and personal grudges. Evan's game had been dragged into the light, and light had a way of burning through even the most carefully constructed illusions. Vivian placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did it," she said. I shook my head. "We did it. All of us who refused to stay quiet." I thought of Karen. Of the other women who had been too ashamed to speak. Of Lily, who had ignored the truth until it crushed her. Of myself, the invisible daughter who had finally forced everyone to see. Evan was gone. This time, not as the victor, but as a fugitive, and I knew deep down that was the true end of his story. The City Hall auditorium was filled with warm light and the hum of anticipation. I stood at the edge of the stage, a plaque heavy in my hands, my name etched in bold. Lettering, Community Leadership Award. The applause that washed over me felt different than any recognition I had ever received. It was not forced or obligatory. It was genuine, a chorus of people who saw me for who I was, not for the role I had been forced to play in my family's drama. I smiled as the cameras flashed, but more than that, I felt steady, grounded in the life I had built on my own terms. In my acceptance speech, I spoke not of betrayal or revenge, but of visibility. I told the crowd about the countless children who had grown up overlooked, their achievements muted by louder voices, their dreams dismissed as inconvenient. Worth, I said, does not come from those who fail to see us. It grows from within. But sometimes, all it takes is one person to say, I see you. And a life changes forever. The audience rose to their feet, the sound of their clapping echoing in my chest like a promise kept. That night, at a smaller gathering with colleagues and friends, I announced the launch of the Visibility Grant, a scholarship for academically gifted students whose accomplishments had gone unnoticed. It would pay for their tuition, housing, and books. It would ensure no one else had to build a secret life in the shadows just to survive. The words tasted right as I spoke them. Not just a plan, but a legacy. After the crowd thinned, Aunt Diane approached, her eyes shining with quiet pride. She waited until we were alone before speaking. You know, Elena, she said softly. You weren't as alone as you thought. I tilted my head, curious. Diane continued, that first year at Columbia, the scholarship didn't cover everything. You must have wondered how you managed to scrape by. It was me. I sent the money. Anonymous. I wanted you to have a chance I never had. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. My vision blurred. Diane placed a hand over mine. I couldn't watch you be buried the way I once was. I saw myself in you, and I wanted to give you the start I never got. I squeezed my aunt's hand, gratitude radiating from my chest. I thought of all the nights I had stayed up in my dorm room calculating every dollar, believing I was utterly on my own. To know now that someone had quietly been in my corner, it changed the shape of my memories, softened the edges. Thank you, I whispered, and Diane only smiled as if she had been waiting years to hear it. Later, back at my home office, I sat with my laptop open, drafting the first announcement for the scholarship fund. The glow of the screen lit my face as I worked, every keystroke a small act of defiance against the silence that had once smothered me. I paused when a new email notification appeared. The subject line read simply, from Lily. My chest tightened as I clicked it open. The message was short. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I can't undo what I did, but I wanted you to know I had a daughter. She's healthy. She's beautiful. And I thought maybe you'd want to meet your niece. Do you? I leaned back, staring at the words. For years, my sister had been both rival and wound. Now, here was a bridge extended, fragile and trembling. I didn't know if I would cross it, but I knew the choice, at last, was mine. I rose and moved to the window. Outside, the city stretched in a sprawl of lights, vast and alive. My reflection looked back at me. Not the invisible daughter, not the neglected child, but a woman who had reclaimed her own worth. The glass was cool against my fingertips as I whispered to myself, steady and certain, I chose freedom. And I do not regret it. So that was Elena's story. The invisible daughter who was forced to her sister's wedding under threat, only to return stronger than ever, exposed the fraud, and reclaimed her worth. She walked away with the truth while her family was left to face the consequences of ignoring her all those years. Some might say she was too cold. Others might say she finally gave them exactly what they deserved. But in the end, Elena chose freedom, and she chose it on her own terms. Now, I want to hear from you. If you were in Elena's shoes, after everything she went through, what would you have done the same? Would you walk away and let them learn the hard way, or would you stay to repair what was broken? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know. Thanks for watching. Take care.